The Gemara, the Talmud tells us in Moed Katan, it tells us a story. It tells us a story that there was a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Hamnuna, and he was traveling in the south of Eretz Yisrael, and he came to a town where he heard that someone had died. How did he hear somebody died? They didn't have, in those days, they didn't have, the internet, there was no radio station, so how did you hear? He heard because they used to blow shofar, and they had a certain type of sound from the shofar that they knew that someone had died. And that's how they would let people know, because we're not supposed to give bad news. So you blew a shofar, and that's how people knew someone had passed away. There were other ways they did it. So he heard the shofar was blown, and he saw people are working. And people still sitting and working. People were picking from an orchard, whatever it was. And he was very upset. He said these people should be put into chayrim. They should be excommunicated from the community. Why? There's a halacha, there's a law that says, meis ba'ir, if a person dies in the city, the entire city is responsible to make sure that they get buried. No one is allowed to work. Everyone is responsible to take it. It's not just the family. We're all a big family. When it comes to burying somebody, everybody is responsible. So how can they keep working? So they answered him, Ika chabura sabir. There's a Chevra Kadisha in the city. Oh, there's a Chevra Kadisha in the city. Then the Chevra Kadisha takes the responsibility off everybody else, and they become responsible to do what needs to be done. And therefore, everyone else is allowed to work. So the Chevra Kadisha doesn't only do chesed with the dead, but the Chevra Kadisha actually does chesed with the living, because it allows them to continue going about their business even when someone has died and they no longer have the responsibility. I would venture to ask a question. I would say in our world, where there is a Chevra Kadisha, but where most people are not looking for the Chevra Kadisha. Most people have no interest in a Chevra Kadisha. What is the responsibility of the community? And what is the responsibility of the Chevra Kadisha? It's a tough question. I'd love to ask the question to a big tzaddik and get an answer, which I've never done really. But I would say simply, there certainly is a responsibility on every member of the Jewish community, on some level, to try to see that everyone is buried, number one, and if possible, buried kala, to be buried with tradition, to be buried with a tahara, to be buried in a way that is really respectful. One second, let me just finish the thought, and then I'll take a question, not a problem. I think, and I would venture to say, that we who are involved in Chevra Kadisha may have a greater responsibility. Not that I think we can go out there and snatch bodies and bury them and do anything that is illegal or anything like that. But at least in the sense of creating awareness, at least in the sense whatever we can do, whether it's within our own family, whether it's on our block, in our building, in our neighborhood, in our shul, to raise awareness, to just start talking about the fact that people really need to reach out. I remember having a discussion in South Florida in 1984 with Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, Zichrono Livracha. And this was at, I don't know if the hotel still exists, but it was called the Savion, if I remember correctly. What? The Savron. You got it, Savron. Still there? No. Okay, anyway, the Savron Hotel. We met, and he said to me, who is a mace mitzvah in America? That was a question he asked me. Who would be considered a mace mitzvah? A mace mitzvah means someone who has no one to bury them. And his answer was astounding. His answer was, Ayede Yid Verstapt. Every Jew that dies. Every Jew that dies in America in 1984 is in the category of a mace mitzvah. And I'll tell you very simply, in 1971, which is not that much before 1984, in Queens, New York, not in Florida, the percentage of Jewish people who were having tahara was under 5%. Having tahara. They were not cremated, it was pre-cremation. But tahara was unknown. Everyone assumed if you went to a Jewish funeral home, they did it the Jewish way. That was the assumption. Unless they were a member of a shul that had a Chevra Kadisha, or they lived in Borough Park, maybe it was different. Very, very, very frum community. But other than that, it was unknown. But there are other issues. People die and the cemetery is not open, or people get buried and then they don't realize they're being buried in a section of a cemetery that isn't necessarily fully Jewish, never mind traditional. There's a million issues.